In this demo, I will show you how we can implement a simple application on macOS which will capture a window. Basically, what we need to do is what I intend to have. It's a simple application which will allow us to capture only just a window from the screen, and we will capture the window content regardless if the window is shown or not. So the benefit of having this application with respect to the context in which we give demos is that imagine that you need to cheat in a way as a presenter. Like for instance, you need to have your code already implemented that you follow with the trainees. So what you do, normally you have on one side of the screen you have your setup with your environment in which you are following the code, but because the code is too complex, you will not write it from scratch with your audience, but rather you will just follow your implementation and you just present what you implemented. But the idea is to do the implementation from scratch together with the audience, or just presenting them the implementation, whereas they don't see the actual source code that you are following. So several times I had this need, and it is normally when you give trainings that you need this feature. So what I did so far, I found what I needed on macOS because for convenience purposes I'm using a MacBook Pro. So this is the laptop I'm using just to give presentations. It's a small one. It's a 13-inch macOS. Okay, so not big deal, just a Core i5 with 16 gigabytes of RAM. But the idea is that it is very convenient because it's light and you just have a compact laptop to carry with you. It's very convenient to use it wherever you give demos. So my target OS was, because of the hardware, macOS. So what I did so far, I found a library which is using Cocoa, the object library for macOS UI, and I have a wrapper on top of it which can find a window based on the process ID and can capture the content of the window by the handler of the window. So this is the binary implementation of the library, and I just have defined with JNI some wrappers on top of it. Now, I created a small project that aims to push the content of the window periodically to a WebSocket. So I have a small server which is using JavaLint. That's a simple microservice engine that can fire up Jetty. So with JavaLint, I create a server. I will deliver some static resources from the root of my resource folder. So because it's a Maven project, I just go in here and I will deliver static resources from this folder. My project depends on several components, like for instance, I have a dependency to JavaLint just to fire up a small microservices web server. This is just to configure the logger of JavaLint, and those two are, I don't use it. I can as well remove it because I don't have a complex application to serialize to the client this kind of data. Nevertheless, so what I do here, and this is just the whole code I have. First of all, I start JavaLint on 8080 port. I configure it to serve static resources from the resources folder, and then I register a web service endpoint to deliver the captured image of a window. Now, when I connect the session, I will have a synchronized list with all the sessions. So I just add to this list. When a session is closing, I remove from the list, and I have no special treatment when receiving a message from a session. Actually, I will not receive any messages from sessions, but rather I will push data to the sessions. Now, I just start my server. And you can imagine that I need to have a timer, and from time to time to capture the screen and just push it back to the sessions. I also hijack the error console because when Jetty starts, it sends a lot of data to the error console, which I like to skip in my final console. And then I just read with a scanner commands from the command line. And I need to set up a reference to the window that I should use to capture. I then wait for commands. If I have a new line, so basically I can skip this. But if I have a new line, I then okay, just skip this because I already have it in here. So I read a new line. If the user entered exit, I will just stop the process. I have only one command which I implement beside exit, which is capture. So capture, this is because I don't have a convenient way to select the window of a process. So what I do, I say capture and the ID of the process, and then I will have to label all the windows of the process. So I have an atomic integer because I iterate this through collection streaming. And then I ask the user to choose a window from the list. I call my wrapper. This is my window capture support from the library that I was telling you about. This one. This is doing all the magic. And I try to find all the windows for this process ID. Then I display the windows just with the number and the title of the window. I'm waiting to get the next integer from the command line, and I'm getting the index of the window that I should use. So from the list, I take the corresponding window to this index, and then I set it to be my object reference. This will be the window that I display. If the timer was already started, what was already created, then I cancel the timer. I then create a new timer and submit a task to the timer. When the task executes, it will check if the reference of the window is set, and if so, it will continue calling my window capture tool to get the window snapshot data of the current window that I monitor. I then save the data as PNG format, portable network graphics, and I take the byte of the window, the content of the image. I iterate through all the sessions, and for each session I get the remote to send data back to the HTML client, and I just wrap a buffer over these bytes, and this will be sent to the client. The timer is scheduling the task to start right away and perform 5 times per second. And then I just output a message to the user that this is the window I'm capturing from. Now, on the client side, because it's a JavaScript application, I just took jQuery to manipulate the DOM, Bootstrap CSS just to have a container displaying the image, and a controller of the page. So this is my form. It's quite easy. I include the Bootstrap CSS, jQuery, the page controller, and I have just one simple divider, which is the container itself, which should line up the page with a nice grid layout. And in the end, I have an image with an ID. What the page controller is doing, I create when the document was loaded, I then create a WebSocket, and the WebSocket should be on the same server as the application itself. And if you remember, I registered a WebSocket to the capture context. Now, my JavaScript opens this socket, sets the binary type of the socket to be an array of a buffer array. That is what kind of data transfer I'm using. And then I subscribe to the onMessage event of the socket to call this function. I then create an array of integers, unsigned integers with the data that I have. And I have to write the base64 string of bytes to be displayed as being the content of the image. So what I do, I iterate through the content of my buffer, and then I take each char from the buffer and do a from char code to get the char out of it. In the end, I access the image by the ID of the image and set the source property to be a PNG, an image of type PNG, and this is the base64 content, and I convert the bytes to ASCII out of this data. Now, let me show you how it works. So I start the server, and when I start the server, I also need to set the path to the library, but this is already configured by my runner. So when I actually run this, if I go to the run configuration, you will see that my server is actually using a Java library path as being in the lib folder of my project, because it has to find and load the binary library that supports the JNI wrappers. Now let's just say that I like to fire up a terminal here. So my terminal, it's this one, and sorry, but I don't have a convenient way to get the window that I like to display, rather than selecting it based on the process ID. So let me just fire up my activity monitor and try to find out which is the process ID of the terminal. So it's 2149. So let's just say I like to capture 2149 process. It asks me to enter the window I like to capture, and the one that I like to use, it's the second one. As you may see by the title of the window, this is what it displays and should be the second one. Now it says you are capturing from this window, and this is the title of the window. Now let's just fire up Safari and load my UI. So as you may see, it's a clean UI. I only display the image and I do no transformation on the image. So it's just the raw image I take, and each change I do on my terminal will be reflected in my window. So let's try and see how it behaves and try to see if it follows the text entered. There is this delay though, but not that much. So if I fire up my MC, you will see if I click an option here, then eventually if you see with some delay, like half a second or even a second, you see it gets updated. It's not that great, but come on, it is very powerful in the way that even if I hide this window, okay, not very good idea. You see this is hidden also, but let me try to put something on top of my window. So let me just say that I open my settings, and those are now on top of my window. But even if they are staying on top of my window, if I go here, I see no interference with my window. So this is great, because remember what we were aiming. We aimed at being able to capture the content of a window even if we have something on top of the window. Like when you do your demo, you just present the window in which you implement the code, but you have side by side or even on top of it your real your already implemented code. So having this, it's quite great. Not that great that if you hide this, it will disappear. But let me try to capture another window. Let's say that I like to capture the system preferences. I'll go back and check the system preferences on my activity monitor. So let's try to find the system preferences. So it's 2202. Go back here and say I like to capture the process 2202. There is only one window, and let's just use that window. So now when I should eventually this should be refreshed somehow, but perhaps it is because of the fact that I'm using the wrong window. Let me try to see another window, though it's not perfect. It is still under development, but nevertheless, let's say that I'm using Visual Studio here. It is Visual Studio for macOS, so it's the community edition of Visual Studio. And let's say that I like to capture from this window. So let's go here and try to find which is the ID of the Visual Studio. So it's 2224. Let's go back to my Eclipse and then capture 2224 process. And I have one window. Let's just use this window. If I go back in here, now I see that it gets updated. And when it gets updated, I have the window with Visual Studio. Now let me try to minimize this window and see what's happening. So when I minimize it, yes, indeed, I do have an issue that the window is closed. I mean, I will not be able to capture from it anymore. But still, it is great in the way that I can, for instance, place something on top of my window. So this is the original window, but if I then place the terminal on top of it, I don't see the terminal. So as long as you have your window displayed, it will be able to capture from it, and you will be able to put whatever you like on top of it. The audience won't see it, and you will still be able to follow your demo. So I can improve this. First improvement I need to do is make sure that I capture even if the window is minimized, and also find a nice way to select the window, not just ask the user for the process ID, which is quite embarrassing, having to do that and then select the window based on the title and enter like so. But nevertheless, it's doable. So thanks for watching. That was all.